My name is John Llewellyn and I'm a founding partner of Llewellyn Consulting here in London. So we're a macroeconomic company. We give macroeconomic advice. Sometimes we say it's top-down advice in the areas of pure macroeconomics, if you like, fiscal policy, monetary policy, a little bit to do with regulation, but also broader drivers of performance like demography, climate change, technology, but always from the top down. Well, perhaps the first big thing that we did after we'd set up the company was that we were asked to write a study on Europe, and in particular on whether the euro area was going to survive, because at that stage it was going through some difficulties. And the so-called Anglo-Saxon press, the English language press, was stating pretty categorically that the euro area was doomed and would break up imminently. That was not our judgment. Our judgment was that while there were flaws in the construction of the system, and no economist, I think, would doubt that, our judgment was that the political will was such that they would do whatever was necessary to make the institutional changes to make it work. And so we came out with this big 100-page study called Europe Will Work, saying that we did not believe that breakup was imminent. It was quite controversial, and in fact my co-author, a man called Peter Westaway, who was chief economist in Nomura at the time, received a huge amount of criticism from traders and other people on the floor of Nomura for this view. But as you know, so far it's turned out to be right. I think if you're an economic advisor, it's intellectually extremely interesting and exciting to work on important questions which people really want to have answers for and are going to take decisions in some cases as a result of getting it. That's exciting. Another dimension that's exciting is wrestling with a new problem. It's really quite surprising, but it doesn't take very long in almost any area of economics to get to the frontier of knowledge. You dig into it for a few days, read the literature, and pretty soon you're at the frontier of knowledge and you find yourself facing as many questions as you do answers. So intellectually it's exciting, in policy terms it's exciting. That's really quite a lot. When you approach a new subject, when you get to the frontier of knowledge and find yourself asking more questions than you have answers to, when you've read what you trust is all the relevant literature and research, your mind is in a bit of a muddle, and the process of trying to organize all that material in a coherent way is quite demanding. I think all of the senior people here in this firm who do it find they need almost total quiet. They need long spells of time in which to churn this material in their minds. And then there's a short period of elation when you think, I've got it. I've got a way of telling the story, seeing my way through this from beginning to end. That's a challenge. So university teaching is one thing, and that's not a criticism of the university at all. You have to have economic theory. But then applying it into actual concrete issues is very demanding. And it requires good basic skills, Excel skills, writing skills, editing skills, and editing is not always the same thing as writing. And then simply, I think after that you start acquiring experience as to how to bring judgment to bear on questions, because very few economic issues are black and white, binary, yes or no. They require judgment. You have to look at the conflicting evidence and reach a conclusion. So I think the skills are, the better your degree, the better the theory you have, the better. But then don't expect that that's what you're going to be doing when you join a practical research body, because you'll be using a different set of skills which by and large you'll acquire on the job. I think if you want to do economic research, and a lot of people do, it's probably a very good idea to join a team, as obviously as a junior member, a good team, so that you'll be taught good research practices by the older members of the team. I mean, in my own case, I joined a body which no longer exists now, unfortunately, which was the Department of Applied Economics in the University of Cambridge. And there I was the junior member of a team of very experienced people, ranging from Professor Nicholas Kaldor, who was then in his 60s, Professor Wynne Godley, who was in his 50s, but then a number of other economists who were in their 40s and their 30s. And you learn such a lot from experienced people. But there are other bodies. There are research bodies in all the major countries of Europe, for example, in the UK, in France, in Italy. But I think joining a team is very good. It's very difficult, I think, as a young person to do research on your own. You can very quickly run out of steam, run out of motivation, run out of ideas. So you both need people to talk to and to learn from. I think there are certain questions which any student needs to ask themselves. One which is quite fundamental is try to establish whether you're a microeconomist or a macroeconomist. That's quite basic. It's a shibboleth, really. It's the equivalent to, if you're a linguist, are you a translator or are you an interpreter? Nobody is both. The second thing I would say is recognize that the work you'll be doing is quite different from what you were trained to do at university, which, as I have said, is not a criticism of university, but it's just a fact that it's different. The third thing I'd say is that you're going to have to learn that elusive quality which is called judgment, because whereas theories are crystal clear, empirical evidence almost never is. And so you look at the evidence and it will partially support your view and partially argue against your view. You'll look at other evidence to bear, and at the end of it you have to form a judgment, and that judgment has to be no stronger but no weaker than the evidence. And that's a process which you get through maturity, but it's one you should be aiming at from the very beginning. Your progress will be determined in a surprisingly large degree by how well you can write, and later by how well you can speak. The writing is crucial. If you can do good research but you can't write it well and clearly, then somebody else is going to have to do it for you, probably your boss, and your boss won't be pleased at that. Your boss will not be pleased if he or she gets a piece of text and says, I don't really understand this, it's not clear, it's not logical, things aren't presented in the right order, the sentences are too long, the argumentation is mixed up. They're not going to be pleased. And they're going to love you if you hand them up a clear draft which runs logically from the beginning through to the end. Even if they edit it and make it better, they'll find that enjoyable. So the ability to write is extremely important. Always aim at the highest possible quality. And I think there are various reasons for saying that. I mean, one is, and probably the most important, is that if you do work of the highest possible quality, you have internal, personal, intellectual satisfaction. And that's very important, that you can go home at the end of the day or at the end of the week or at the end of a year and say, yeah, I've done the best job I could. That becomes surprisingly important, surprisingly early. I think there's also a commercial reason for saying that. And that is, if you do a really first-class job, in our experience, the work comes to you. You don't have to go out and chase it all that hard. Obviously, having a reputation is helpful, and therefore, if you're starting a new business, that will tend to be easier if you're older, because more people will know of you. But it's quite surprising how fast reputations spread by word of mouth. And if you do a good job as a very senior person in a firm, then people come to your firm and offer you work. If you do very good work as a junior, the most junior person in the firm, it goes through the firm very quickly and it spreads outside, and such people get sought out. So I think to do first-class work to the absolute best of your ability, professional if you like, quality, that's what I would say one should aim at.